I'll share with you guys. Almost everything that I study now is channeled work.
Right.
Not that we don't delve into, obviously, Center for Spiritual Living. We go back and look at the work of Ernest Holmes, and we were working at a Unity Church, and so we were studying with Myrtle and Charles Fillmore, and then Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill came in at about that same time. But all of those teachings are, I'll say conservatively, at least 75, 80 years old, right? And a lot's changed. And since A Course in Miracles came about in 1965 and 72, what Jesus really taught us there was basically what he said in that teaching was primarily, now is the time for me to teach you what I couldn't tell you before. Because we can't understand quantum physics if we don't understand, 1 + 1 is 2. We've got to get the basics down. And it's only taken us a couple thousand years, to get some of this basic principles down of love, which is what he taught. But he felt like that this was the time to come back and to come through. Helen Shotwin was to begin to teach us what is so radical that even his disciples at the time didn't really believe it. I mean, they weren't completely grasping it, because it seems like this world is very real.
But how do we know these channels are true? I mean, some of it can be a lot of BS. If people are trying to make
That's right.
money.
That's right. And I'll tell you how I know it's true. And then again, I tell people all the time, don't believe anything that I say.
Right.
Find out for yourself, right? But how I know it's true is because I started having experiences. Once I began to accept it to a certain degree, then I began to have experiences that became confirmations of the truth of it. Okay. And then also I was led from one teacher to another teacher to another teacher. And so I kind of had to start letting go. And I started seeing that there were some teachers that they were beginning to get a grasp of it, but then they were getting locked in on a certain interpretation of A Course in Miracles, as an example. So when Gary Renard published a book called The Disappearance of a Universe, you guys heard of that? Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard. He was sitting at home meditating, and he opened up his eyes, coming out of his little meditation deal, and there's two people sitting on his couch. And the house was locked, and his dog Noopy was there, but his wife was at work, and he was living up in Maine, and there was nobody else around. And well, the woman evidently was fairly attractive, and so she caught his attention first, but instead of freaking out, she started introducing herself to him, and she kind of disarmed him. But they showed themselves as ascended masters, right? And there's an area in the Course in Miracles where he refers to, for those that are willing to accept it. In other words, there's things that we don't experience simply because we just don't believe it's possible. We don't believe it's true, or even remotely possible. So we block out a lot of what's available to us. And that's why we know some people are clairvoyant, some people are clairaudient. But you may not feel that you are, or you may know most people don't think that that's possible for themselves. And a lot of people have been indoctrinated into a belief system where they believe that that's wrong, that's blasphemous. That maybe there's some evil entity that's trying to communicate and manipulate you and possess you. And we've got these great movies about being possessed and those kinds of things. And our church has really tried to scare the hell out of us by teaching us to be fearful. Their whole premise is about fear. Scare the hell out of us, or scare us into hell, or whatever. But the point is that they're trying to scare us into believing that even hell itself is real, that that's a possibility. That God would be judgmental, wrathful, vengeful, and would condemn us to eternal damnation, blah, blah, blah. But for me, it was beginning to allow myself to push against those boundaries that I had. And I'll tell you that I didn't have a lot of indoctrination. I didn't come up in a Catholic church, so I didn't have any of that. My dad played music here in Nashville and around Middle Tennessee, so his God was the country music. He was a Presbyterian, right? On Sunday mornings, about once every 6 or 8 weeks, or 3 or 4 months, right? But the rest of the time it was party hardy, have fun,
Right.
play music, and get through the week and try to feed the kids. So there wasn't a heavy indoctrination. So that by the time I was old enough to drive the car, and we had a lot of kids, so I would take the kids to church. Mom and Dad would stay home, which was the only time they ever could find themselves alone, was to be at home.
Yeah.
And I would he'd say, well, you take the kids to church, and I was old enough to drive. I only had one older sister. So I would drive everybody to church, and I would leave. I didn't want to hear it. I really figured out that by the time I was 12, 13 years old, I was going straight to hell anyway. It didn't really matter, right? And I got baptized at least once, maybe twice, on a particular, when there was a revival or something, and my dad would take us, whatever. And I remember one Sunday night I got baptized, Got up the next day and had no idea what that was about, really.
Right.
I didn't know what any of it was about. I was just going through the motions, and I was really just a child. So as soon as I could, I pulled away from that teaching, because I would see, and I've shared this before, but I would see people that they would get drunk and carouse and
Right.
they weren't faithful, to the relationships were bad, and then they would party and fight and all that shit all weekend, and then on Sunday morning, they'd show up at church and they would be asking for forgiveness from this God
Right.
that I didn't understand. And then next Friday night, they were right back on the scene doing the same thing over and over. And I finally said, this is just hypocritical. None of this makes any sense.
Right. Right.
And so I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So that was a blessing, really, because I wasn't heavily indoctrinated into fear or guilt or judgment. I just figured, if I'm going to go to hell, I'm going to go to hell, so be it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really worship that kind of an entity that would be so fickle as to put my younger brother, who passed away when he was 3 years old, that he would be in hell fire for all eternity because he didn't know Jesus.
Right.
Well, I couldn't buy. So how could this God not love my brother when I loved him? My parents loved him.
Right.
They weren't too concerned. I mean, they certainly wouldn't see him going to hell for eternity because he didn't know Jesus. I mean, none of it made any sense. So I kind of pulled away from it. So for 30 years or more, I just had nothing to do with any of it, right? And then I bought this book. It was about making more money. It was called A Rich Man's Secret by Vernon Howard. But it was really a covered over introduction to Zen philosophy. And next thing you know, I'm starting to practice being present. I'm starting to meditate, even though I didn't know what meditation was. Or this phrase, transcendental meditation, suddenly was on my horizon. And I'm on the internet, which really wasn't very good in 1981, 82, around there. And I'm trying to find out what is transcendental meditation. I didn't understand this language, this Buddhist culture. So I struggled with that, but I kept working through it for about almost 15 years. And then suddenly I kept working to make money. That was really kind of the Buddhist introduction really brought more peace into my life. I became more allowing and accepting, but it wasn't a practice of forgiveness, really. It was just about being present and not jumping to conclusions too quickly. And that seemed to work for me, where other people around me at work would be flying off the handle, and I suddenly found myself being able to kind of just be the presence of calm and just help them to gather themselves and come to themselves. And so that started working for me, and I found benefit in it. But it wasn't like I'm working towards salvation or something like that. This was just a better way of life. It was just a better way of living. And so I thought Vernon's description of the title of the book was quite appropriate. It's a rich man's secret to be able to be at peace in your life for whatever you might be doing. Right. And so I started doing personal development. That's why I mentioned, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, because I was teaching in personal development and helping people to understand what now I understand are spiritual principles, but at the time they were just principles of good living that helped to bring more peace in my life, and I was just sharing those things with people. And so I was studying people that were doing personal development work, Wayne Dyer And then Eckhart Tolle came on the scene. You guys have heard of him, I'm sure. And you know, one thing led to another. So I'm teaching personal development, and I'm studying with these mentors, and I began to I kept hearing this thing about this book called A Course in Miracles. And I thought, well, you know, shit, I'm going to have to get it. You know, everybody else is reading it, so I'll get that and read it. And as soon as I picked it up, it just started immediately speaking to me in a very profound way. And I read it through 5 times in the first year. In the first year I picked it up, I was in a place where I had some residual income coming in, and nobody else in my life really to tell me what to do with my day. And so I would just study 6 or 8, sometimes 10 hours a day. So I read through the whole book, and then I read through it again. And then I read through it again. I thought, have I even read this? Because every time I would read it, I would get more and deeper and deeper and more profound, right? And even when I still read it today, I get more and deeper, profound meaning from it. But eventually, I began to really understand that the Course really was teaching us something that was very, very radical from what the world has taught us, what the church has taught us, and what we've come to believe. And it was a channeled work from Jesus. And through that process, John, I'll just say that I started having spiritual experiences that were confirmations that I was on the right path. At least the questions that I had were being answered. And when I would come up with those answers through this communication of what I now understand is really our higher self, I would get these confirmations. And so that one thing led to another. So that's my suggestion to everybody is to pursue it with diligence, because you will begin absolutely to start having spiritual experiences. And I will tell you more that I know now, of course, is that since that happened 50 years ago, the teaching of A Course in Miracles has affected millions upon millions of people. And we have raised our consciousness. And because we've raised our consciousness globally, the race consciousness, if I can use that term, right? Mass consciousness, race consciousness. Because we've raised that consciousness, it's like this veil has begun to lift. And now more and more of the non-physical entities that we could say are our brothers and sisters or enlightened beings, or even those who have not ever taken human form, are channeling through those of us who have evolved consciously to higher levels, and we become clairaudient, we become clairvoyant, and we can begin to be a channel for this higher frequency, this higher energy. Does that make sense? And because that's coming through now faster and faster, we're getting it and we're raising our consciousness even more. And so spiritual alchemy is about that transformation, your transformation from a human, and not to a spirit person, but an integration of the human self and the higher self, if we can call it that. In the Course in Miracles, is referred to as the Holy Spirit. But he also says that it's nothing more than your right mind. It's the part of you that never really bought into the illusion or the dream, and he calls it a dream. And if you've read A Course in Miracles, then you begin to see that that's the narrative that he teaches in A Course in Miracles, is to help us to grasp the reality that we think is so real. It's really just like the dreams we have at night. It seems absolutely real while we're in it, but as soon as we awaken from it, we see the flimsiness of it. We see the transparency of it. We see that it was just a projection of mind. And that's how powerful our minds are. Our minds are continuously projecting illusion, if you will. So over the last few weeks, over the last five classes that we've had, I've shared with you guys, I've shared with the people here, and so this may be a little bit of a repeat for some of you, but it's Lisa, right? I want to just kind of talk about, I'm just going to say there's we teach a workshop called Levels of Consciousness. And we divide it up into really basically 4 levels of consciousness. And with each one of these levels, this is a vibrational field. And let's say that this is the field of the world. We'll call that level 1, 2, 3, and 4. This level is pretty much where all of the world of form is happening. This is a very low vibration. This is where sin, sickness, and death are prevalent in all of our experiences. It also is the level of fear and guilt. And this is the level that our churches have really indoctrinated us into, that God put you here, or some entity put you here, and that you're basically a victim. And if God put you here and didn't tell you why he did it to you until you die, then basically you're his victim, if you want to look at it like that. But the next level that we get up to here this is a line of demarcation, we could say. This next level, level 2, is really what we call manifester. When we're doing that here in this lower level, we're manifesting our experience, but we're unconscious of it because we don't realize how powerful our mind is. We do not realize the simple idea that thoughts are things. So whenever you have a thought of love, you create a vibration. And it resonates out in the world and it reflects back to you. That same energy. And it attracts to you. And you're talking about the law of attraction. It attracts that energy because like attracts like. Right? Fear begets fear. Love begets love. Right? But when you have a thought of fear and guilt and all these other emotions, we call them emotions like anger, hatred, jealousy, depression, anxiety, pride, all of those are in there. These really are just outpicturings of that one emotion, fear, right? So the only emotions that are really the base of all of our experiences are fear or love. So even in this in this vibration, which is a higher vibration, where we manifest, we're beginning to realize that thoughts are things, and we're beginning to realize that, hey, what's the common denominator everywhere you are is you, right? It's you. So you're manifesting your experience. Here's in this level of consciousness where pretty much all of us here in the United States, by and large, I'll say we're kind of 50-50 here, but here in the United States, in the Western culture, most people are, catching on more than ever now, especially in these last 30, 40 years, that, hey, thoughts are things, and we are manifesting our experience. And it still feels like it's happening to us. It still feels like it's happening to us, but it's never happened to you because God didn't create victims. What God created is perfect. And you are an idea in the mind of God that is an idea of perfection. You are perfect, neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing toward it. And it's important for us to begin to grasp that so that we can begin to see ourselves therefrom, right? So the first level here of transition from victim consciousness to manifestor consciousness, really we could say is courage. And another way of looking at that would be integrity. In other words, I'm willing to start being honest with myself. I'm willing to say, wait a minute, I just told a lie. Even if I thought I was trying to protect somebody, I told a white lie. Oh, that's no big deal, it's just a white lie. A lie is a lie. And what's a lie? A lie is an expression of fear. Right? If you're expressing love, you wouldn't ever lie, right? Because you're in a higher vibration. So integrity is this next level, as I like to call it. The manifest level is literally the level of integrity, because I have to be in integrity to be in this level of consciousness. And it doesn't mean that I don't dip occasionally, maybe down into victim consciousness. Somebody pisses me off, cuts me off, doesn't buy me a Christmas present, whatever the case may be. Right?
It's probably fluid.
It's very fluid. It's really fluid. And so at the end of the day, we're doing this, right? But when we get up into these higher levels of consciousness, those are peak experiences. And those are the experiences I'm telling you that if you persist in studying this map of consciousness and you begin to practice the practices that we'll share with you through these next few months and years, you will begin to have peak experiences that will validate that you are absolutely on the right path, right? You'll also begin to have more and more and more love and joy in your life. It just becomes, this is the side effect, if you will, of keeping the main thing, is that you begin to experience more and more joy and less of things that cause you to believe that it was ever possible for you to be a victim in the first place or for somebody else to be a victim. You begin to see their power. You begin to see, even though it looks like somebody's a victim, that it's a setup that they created for themselves to awaken from an illusion, because that's what we did. And we can look back at our experience and say, wow, I set myself up there so that I could make a choice. And as soon as I got to the point where I could be courageous enough to act out of integrity, right, then I started experiencing more love and joy in my life. I started to see in a new way. The color of my glasses literally began to shift, and I could see more clearly. Before that, I was kind of in a fog. And as said in the Bible, looking through looking through a darkly colored glass or a dark colored glass or whatever it is. So the next level that we teach is what we call channel consciousness. And this is certainly not the first goal, but it is a goal that I think is worthy of your time to commitment, because it's absolutely possible for you to begin to channel, okay, as you raise your consciousness, as you're raising, these are vibrational levels. So as you're raising your vibration, this is a higher consciousness, a higher frequency. And as you're raising your consciousness, you begin to have communication, direct communication, or certainly indirect communication. You might call it, you might get more inspiration, right? You might get more intuitive nudges that kind of keeps you out of trouble. You're starting to do something or make a decision, and suddenly you have an intuitive nudge that says, "What? Don't do that," right? Maybe you shouldn't drink that other beer, or maybe you shouldn't go spend an afternoon with that person, right? Or maybe you should go spend an afternoon with that person and give them a little love, right? You don't have to agree with their story of their victim experience or whatever that might be, but to just be loving and to you begin to become the witness to the truth that you are experiencing and can show that experience as your being in a higher consciousness, in higher vibration. And so this voice that begins to speak to you, if you will, in whatever form it might take, is truly your higher self. As Jay says in A Course in Miracles, it's nothing more than your right mind, the Holy Spirit.
I think you become more aware of your life almost every minute of it.
You do.
And then, and so nothing goes by without you being aware of it.
Right. Well, you're much more present.
Yeah.
Right? You're much more present. So I want to backtrack a little bit and say that down here, you're kind of in the middle of a shitstorm about 75% of the time. You're very little joy and love down here, right? If you have any doubt about that, just turn on the news, right? Which is always now 24/7.
Yeah.
And all you're hearing there is we need more justice, there's a perpetrator, there's victims, there's hell, there's war, there's all that. And that's this very low consciousness, very low vibration. When you get up into this vibration, you really kind of have to tune that out to get here. If you're going to immerse yourself in this pool of consciousness continuously, it's very difficult to rise above it. So you have to set an intention to be in an environment, hang out with people that are not going to horror shows all the time, but maybe they're going to church once in a while, right? Or going to a class like this one, or doing something to move outside of that victim consciousness vibration, right? To move towards a vibration where there's more acceptance and allowance and unconditional, what we say is unconditional love. Well, even just love at all would be good, right?
Well, a lot of it, I was thinking about this over the week, is I think television and technology has affected us immensely in the last 30, 40 years. You can watch TV 24/7, movies, your cell phone, all those things. And you have to come to a point where you gotta choose what to watch. You can't just say, well, this has Clint Eastwood in it, so it'll be a good movie, but 20 people get killed or murdered in it. And then you're like, well, then you don't feel so good after you watch it.
Yeah.
It gets a little tricky.
It does, yeah. And what I find myself doing is, I live downtown, so I'm surrounded by, I really don't watch the news a whole lot, but you have all these apps, the Ring app, the Nextdoor app, and it's just constant people, I can't tell you how many, I've got to get to the point where I've got to get that stuff off my phone, because there's constant turmoil in our neighborhoods. I hate to, I don't even want to know. I want to know, but I don't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like technology, not just the movies, but it's just these little snippets of information that I need to be aware but how do I be aware and hear all this stuff going on in my neighborhood? I mean, 2 doors down, a shooting,
Mm-hmm.
and 3 blocks away, another shooting. I mean,
Mm.
I'm in a nice, high-end, real estate's expensive neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, I do.
And that's where
Right.
that's where I'm at. It's like I'm surrounded. I kind of just want to move, but then again, I don't need to do that. I need to get back to where I was 5 years ago, where things just rolled off of me, and
Mhm.
I didn't even. I was a screen. I just let it move through me
Mm-hmm.
or over me, and I'm just like, and I'm not here to talk about my stuff. I'm not, but I'm here. I'm doing it. But I hear the movie thing, the technology, the apps. It's the and you know what? I feel like it's been in the last 3 years. It's just, I don't know if it's just me, but it's just more and more apps that allow us to know this information.
Right.
Yeah, everything.
It's just driving me nuts.
Yeah.
It's like,
So
I
have you picked up on the idea that that's by design?
yes.
That see, the people that are in power, the people that are in control of and believe and want to hold on to this power and control, are intentionally feeding us continuously, trying to keep us here,
Keep us scared.
That's right.
right? And the only way that you can truly begin to clear this out of your life is to create an environment. You set your intention, and then you put yourself in that environment where you just turn it off. You just have to turn it off. And there's a lady that her name's Tina Louise Spalding. Like, she doesn't do Christmas, she doesn't do cell phones, she doesn't do technology, she doesn't do any of that stuff anymore. And she is just channeling continuously now. And she's experiencing love and joy in her life and profound abundance in ways that she never even thought was possible. And all she's doing is channeling and sharing this news with people that we're sharing here, right? Because this is real. But the world has an agenda, and their agenda is to keep you oppressed and suppressed so that your, number one, fear causes illness and sickness, right? So you work your ass off until you start getting sick, and then you spend what little bit of money you ever made, if you ever did keep any of it, and you spend it all to try to get yourself healthy again. And all of this is a setup. And it keeps us down in here continuously. So we have to, and we are, beginning to reach to each other and saying, look, we don't have to live like that anymore. We can unplug. And the more we unplug from the television, the more we unplug from the radio, it's very difficult. I don't know if you guys have ever tried it, but and maybe you're doing it, but to just go and get in your car and head out. When you leave tonight, will you have your radio on, yes or no?
No.
No. It's perfect.
I put a CD in, I listen to Pastor Hicks all the time.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah.
So if we keep that, if we can turn that off. If we can do it in our car, we can do it in our house, and we can do it on our phone too. But we have to do that intentionally because they have an intention too. Okay? And their intention is to keep us in fear, to keep us warring against each other. So you got the Republicans and you got the Democrats, you got the husbands and the wives, and everybody's lining up on each side of the line, right? To support each other in their agenda against whoever's on the other side of the line. And that's all by design. That's intentional. Because if they don't do that, then they don't keep us in fear, then they don't keep us under control. And their intention is to keep us under control, right? To work hard, to make them money, to keep them in power, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that kind of sounds conspiratorial, but take it for what it's worth. Because you can only look at your own life and your own experiences, and you can find validation that absolutely is true, right? There are forces, they're human forces, but there are forces of low energy that want to keep everybody down in that energy, right? And there's some very intelligent people in power who've been in power for a long time that know that it's easier for us to be willing slaves, if you will, rather than to be forced into slavery, right? It's a whole lot easier for us to be willing to do it. And they do that with little gadgets and bait and things that they set us up with, promises of wealth, promises of health, promises of relationship, et cetera, if we do these prescriptions, if we do the things that they're prescribing for us to do, that we can have those things. But that's not the way it works. It works this way. Thoughts are things. We're experiencing what we focus on. Energy flows where attention goes. So if you focus your attention on love and courage and integrity and realizing that whatever's showing up in your life is you're literally walking through your own consciousness. And whatever you're experiencing is a reflection of your consciousness. And I have to say, and I'm not trying to tell anybody to change your life in any way whatsoever, you have to decide for yourself, but sometimes you do have to follow that intuitive guide that says, you know what, maybe you need to move. Maybe you need to go someplace where you're not exposed to those things. If there's things in your environment that are constantly pulling you down into lower consciousness, right?
Well, there's people. I mean, there's just people that you,
That's right.
yeah.
It can be people that are closest to you.
I mean,
Yeah,
like coworkers.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe you said. I mean,
Right.
everything that you said is so familiar to me. You know, the whole vibration thing. I mean, I want to get. I'm surrounded by very low vibrating entities, even myself.
Mhm.
You know, and so I think everything that you've presented, it's to me, it reminds me of having a muscle that hadn't been worked out. Once you start working at it, I think the energy just continues to roll and move, and it just. I mean, I know that it's just. I've got to get in that space where
Right.
I've been out of that space for so long. I've got to get that space where that muscle gets stronger and stronger. 'Cause
That's right.
what you just said, that's ingrained in me. It's just I'm not living it.
Right, you're not walking the talk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so let me say this. You're in that space now,
Yes.
right here. Like these guys aren't listening to their radios in their cars, right? And the point is, the more you'll hang out with people that are beginning to get this, then it will buoy you up and strengthen your resolve to stay in that energy, right? That's good. That's good. And that's why we're here, right? We came here. I will tell you that Claudia and I came here back in April, and we really feel like that this is our assignment. We came to Nashville from another church up north, but we went to that church too, out of an assignment, and then suddenly we realized, something's shifting, and things do begin to shift when you get into this manifesting, channeling consciousness. Then other entities, your guides, this room is full of people, literally entities, non-physical, that are rejoicing at this experience tonight because they're here with us. Right. They travel with us, and things start shifting and lining up for you to make things easier. When we went to Ohio, we got that assignment, and I woke her up. We were here in Tennessee, actually. This is back in 2014, and the next morning I woke her up and I said, "By the way, we're going back to Ohio." She said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I don't know." And we went back to Ohio. We had no idea why we were going. But as soon as we got there, we got a phone call, literally, the day we drove into town. And a buddy of hers said, "Hey, do you know anybody that's looking for an apartment?" That doesn't just happen, you see. We're manifesting our experience, right? And we're doing it every moment of the day. And this is where we begin to take our power back.
Do you come here on Sunday, Lisa?
No.
I mean, you might want to.
Yeah, I know. It's just I'm kind of out of that space. I've been for so long.
Right. But it's a pretty good group of people that are here.
I used to. I
Yeah.
used to come to the Abraham Hicks. The Esther, and
Mm-hmm.
I came
Sure.
to that.
Yeah,
I think it was a bi-weekly thing, but that's been like 4 or 5 years ago, and I just kind of got out of it.
yeah.
Okay. Well, everything happens when it's supposed to,
That's
right?
right. I'm a firm believer.
And that's right. Everything happens when it's supposed to.
And the teacher shows up when the student's ready. I
There you
feel
go.
that, yeah.
Right. So as soon as we get into operating out of integrity, which is to really start looking and making our own choices for ourselves, right? We're now starting to experience joy and happiness at least 50% of the time. Here it was 25% of the time, right? The next step, when we go to channeling, this here is operating at one level or another. Those first two levels, you're operating at one level or another of fear, if we could put a gradation on it. In other words, as we move up the scale, less and less and less and less fear as part of our experience. But as soon as we cross this line right here, we become the channel. This is all of these last two levels here. This is the level of love, okay? So the first two here is fear, and the last two here is love. Once we jump into this, once we transition into this level of consciousness, we're starting to experience joy and bliss over 75% of the time. Now there's very little that begins to disturb our peace. Even the news, we look at it and we see that it's makyo. We see that it's really nothing. We see the illusory nature of it. And it's just people's thoughts manifesting as they're experiencing. We don't have to go to that party anymore. We don't have to be a part of it anymore. And this last level up here is mystic. And I'll just tell you, this is the level that I aspire to personally. Claudia and I are both doing a lot of channeling now in our personal experiences, but we're both aspiring to this mystic level. The mystic level of consciousness, you're just basically blissed out 95% of the time. And it doesn't mean that, a lot of times in the past, a lot of mystics that have developed this level of consciousness, they just, you've heard the expression vibrate off the planet. I mean, they just kind of checked out. But in the energy that we're in now, we're really beginning to see that this is a time of new creation. We as mystics, as the integrated human, the embodiment of Christ consciousness, if I can use that term, which is just a consciousness. The mystic level is the consciousness of Christ. It's the Christ consciousness. So here we would say is love, and then up the scale a little bit is unconditional love, and then eventually up here is just joy and bliss. We're just kind of blissed out. And then the body literally stops aging. If there's been sickness and illness in our body, the body begins to heal. It's not because we're taking the right medicine or eating the right food. It's because everything that's our thoughts or things, so everything in our life, especially anything that's filtered with fear and guilt, is creating sickness, sin, and death as an experience, because that's the side effect of those energies, right? So what we're doing then here as the spiritual alchemist is to move up this level, is the transformation of our consciousness. And that's why I call the class Spiritual Alchemy. Because you begin to be the alchemist in transforming your own life. You begin to take your power back, because you are this amazing, all-powerful, all power is yours under heaven and earth. That's not a joke. That's the truth. That's the truth about you. So the other thing that we've been covering these last few weeks, just to kind of go over it again, and just kind of bring you up to speed too, Lisa.
I'm going to go pee.
Yep. The other thing that we've been covering, we've been talking about dreams, using dreams as a way of grasping this reality. Right? And so if you've read A Course in Miracles, then it's a pretty good, it's a pretty solid teaching about, and Jesus is using dreams then as, you can look at it as a metaphor or, as an analogy. But when we go to sleep at night, and what I've shared with the group before, so Jesse, I know you've probably heard this, and I know John has, but so when you go to sleep at night, you have this mind of the sleeping self, okay? And sometimes this self is happy, and sometimes it's sad. Sometimes you have nightmares. Sometimes you have great dreams, or whatever it might be, right? And you're experiencing all these things. But as soon as you wake up in the morning, you realize that the whole time you thought you were somewhere else, you were safe at home in bed, right? Now, you may not know where you were. In fact, you don't know where you were or who you're with, or where you're even living or anything. You've literally let go of your existing life right now. I mean, you might bring some parts of it into the drama, the dreamscape that you create out of your imagination. But the self that you are right now, it's there with the dreaming self. It's not the dreaming self. It's watching the dreaming self. The dreaming self presents itself as you, but as soon as you wake up, the bigger you, the self that realizes the life you have today, The people in your life, the job you have, the work you have, your plans for the day, what time of year is. Hello, it's Christmas. All the dreams I had last night, there was no Christmas in it. Right? None.
Poor guy.
Poor guy. Or lucky guy.
What
Yeah. So this self is a little bit, we could say, a more informed self. It's a bigger mind. So this little sleeping self is like a sliver of your mind. It's a little sliver of intelligence. And it's contained within this self that is the you sitting here right now, the human self, if I can call it that. And then if we can expand that one more level, we can begin to see then that there is a level of consciousness that you are that we could call your higher self. In A Course in Miracles, it's called the Holy Spirit. Doesn't matter what you call it, but this is a self that never sleeps, period, period, period. It is the self that sees itself as one, ultimately, with the God self. And all of these are contained within the mind of God. If we could see it as mind, we can see the sliver of the small self, sleeping self, and then this self, which we think we're awake, but truly we're not. Jesus says you're always sleeping. If you're not in this state of mind of your true self, your higher self, then you really are actually in an illusion of sleep, a dream state. The interesting thing about this state of sleeping is that you've got all these other people like John and Jesse and me and Claudia and everybody else in Tennessee and all over the world that are keeping this dreamscape real. And so we never get outside of it. We're within these two states of consciousness all the time, these two states of mind. Rarely do we take ourselves beyond that, but we can then have those peak experiences. Remember, when we get to level, we have 4 levels, but when we get to level 1 and 2, we're channeling. Now we're getting, the higher self is reaching in, and when we become the mystic here, we are transcending out of this state of mind, the state of mind that we see ourselves in right now. Does that make sense? The interesting thing is, if we could circumscribe God, then we would see that all of this is within the mind of God. So God chooses not to sleep. Your higher self never slept. It's awake, right? It's spirit. This is spirit. This is spirit.
Is that like your subconscious? Is that like your subconscious?
No, subconscious would be in here, you know. Subconscious.
What is subconscious?
It's really that part of you. It's like when you sleep here, the sleeping mind at night is not aware of this self. It doesn't know where you're sleeping. It doesn't even know you're sleeping. It doesn't know you're safe at home in bed. It doesn't know what your life is. It would see this self as a subconscious. Does that make sense? So we could look out, just as an analogy or a metaphor, we could look out to the Holy Spirit and say, okay, that we could say that's subconscious, but even that self is it's not sub anything, right?
Right. We only use like a fraction of our mind, in every day.
Well, the brain,
Yeah.
yes, but the mind is not in, you're not physical. Your mind is out here, right? Your physicalness is just a construct. And it's the same way you see yourself when you're dreaming at night. Where's the body at that you had last night in your dreams? Because you saw yourself as a body, right? These are constructs of a limited mind. 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional. Once we get outside here, then we become multidimensional quantum beings of spirit. So this is a spirit self, this is a spirit self. These two selves are physical. All your dreams at night, you're physical, and experiences we're having right now are physical, right? But these are constructs of mind. Time and space are constructs of mind. Okay? Does that make sense? The interesting thing is that we believe ourselves to be out here, outside of God, and that we're separate. But we're not. We're all contained within this. So just like you're safe at home in bed when the dreaming self is having a drama going on tonight when you go to sleep, you'll be safe at home in bed. Right now, where are you? In heaven. Heaven is the mind of God. Thoughts leave not their source. There's no way you could ever be outside of God, right? So God's not out there somewhere. God is all that is. And in fact, you and God, and you've heard this expression many times, right? Are one. But we can't get to that construct with a mind that's so limited. I can't teach my cat to drive my car, no matter how much I talk about it.
Right. So what are the tools to get to the channeling mystic level, Tony?
Aha.
I mean, meditation would probably be one.
It would be. It would be. And tonight and this next month, so you guys will get a little jump start on our group. Any questions about, before we go maybe a little deeper into that, any questions about, does that make sense? Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the assignment for next month, you'll find out right away that I'm not a very good artist.
Practice our art before we come.
Yeah. So imagine a brick wall. We're going to call this a short wall. And right now, we're out here in the world. And what I'm going to be asking you to do is to consider stepping behind a short wall.
Behind what?
Behind a short wall. You're just going
Short wall.
to
Okay, gotcha.
step right over the wall, right? Just take a step over the wall. And when you're on this side of the wall, the practice is to allow all things. What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
Let it be.
Let it be. What does that mean?
Don't judge.
Yeah, I was gonna say, stay out of judgment zone.
Stay out of judgment. That's perfect.
Yeah.
No judgment. Now, I will tell you that the small mind operates only out of fear. It operates only out of judgment. That's not you. No more is the sleeping self that's dreaming tonight you. You didn't wake up this morning and say, oh, I got to go back in the dream tonight and fix that up, because that was me. You realize it was just a fabrication, an expression, illusion, or an outpicturing of ideas that you hold in your mind, and a game you're playing in your own dreamscape that you create. If you kill somebody in your dream tonight, you're not going to get up in the morning and go downtown and turn yourself into the police, because you know you really didn't kill anybody. Dreams have no effect. They're illusion. The hard part is to realize that this is also illusion. So it does look like somebody's dying. It does look like somebody's being unjustly treated or victimized or whatever the case may be. But we, as alchemists, as mystics, we need to rise above it by stepping over the short wall. And on that side of the wall, we're going to let it be. We're not going to judge it. If it looks like it's bad, that's a judgment. If it looks like it's wrong, that's a judgment. What we're trying to do now is to catch ourselves in the act of judging. And when we get over on the short side, step over the short wall, this is the no judgment zone. This is the place where you are guilt-free. You are no longer guilty of being in judgment. You're only over here to practice recognizing when you're in judgment and to withdraw that judgment. So you're going to move back before you gave judgment.
But when we're in love and bliss, or joy and bliss, would that be a judgment?
No, absolutely not. Because if you're in judgment of it, you just went right back down into low energy.
Well, I was trying to just grasp it from a perspective. I mean, if it looks bad, that's a judgment. But if it looks good, it's not a judgment. I mean,
You're either judging things or you are experiencing things. See, as soon as you quit judging, then you become present and you begin to experience. Okay? The thinking self is the small self. So I'm going to add this to the definition of what is being on the other side of the short wall. It's the no thinking zone. I'm not going to think about it. we're just going to tell ourselves, uncomfortable as it may be, to shut up. Don't be thinking about that.
Well, think about good things.
Don't think about anything.
Well, then you're in a state of meditation, probably.
You're present. You are aware. I'm just being aware. It looks like it's good. It looks like it's bad. I've got to think about it to judge it. If I'm not thinking, I cannot judge. Right? Now my mind, the little self, the dreaming self, is thinking all the time. It never stops. I have the power, however, as Christ consciousness, as the child of God, to ignore it. I've always had the power to ignore it. I've always had the power to ignore fear and guilt and shame and anxiety and depression and anger and hatred, etc., because those were all thoughts of a thinking self. And God did not create you, here's the drum roll, to be a thinker. You're the one that decided you were going to play God and think it all up for yourself. You step over the wall and now you're back in the thinking world. Turn on the news and watch what everybody's doing. Huh?
So what do you do if you don't think?
You become aware. Your awareness itself. That is the mystic level.
I mean, that sounds so easy, but it's full.
It's a daunting.
Witness, the observer.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes we,
John's question, I really liked what you were saying. He was hinting towards, what isn't good in judgment. And yet we're taught to think better thoughts.
Yeah.
Going in the other diagram of the vibration, the vibratory field,
Mhm.
think better thoughts so that you're having, you're attracting better experiences.
right?
Right.
So then, you could say you're aware of what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And then once you become aware of what you're thinking, maybe like Tony said, then you can stop thinking. I guess it's how you define thinking.
Well, let's put it this way. If you are just a receiver, okay, like a radio station, and I can tune it in to the AM station, right?
Right?
I can't stop the stream. I'm either giving it my awareness or I'm not.
Right?
Right? I've got a passenger and I got my radio going and they're talking blah, 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 but the person that's sitting next to me starts talking a conversation and I'm going down the road and you know what? I didn't hear a word that the radio announcer said because I withdrew my attention. I focused my attention over here, right? Now, as we move into these higher levels of consciousness, you're not alone. You've never been alone. You are partnered with the capital C comforter, capital F friend, capital G guide, capital T teacher. We would call that your true self, your higher self. What we're trying to do is to become a good listener and ask the simple question, are you there?
Right.
And listen for a reply. Now this takes dedication and it takes practice because we've got the radio turned up real loud and we can't hear that very still quiet voice because we've got the radio turned up so damn loud it's drowning out. It's like having somebody sitting in the back seat trying to have a conversation with you and you got the radio turned up. You got to turn that down, and the only way you can turn it down is to withdraw your attention. That's like turning the volume down on that thinking fearful self, the small self. And so what I'm doing now is creating space to be able to tune in to the FM channel, right? Another frequency, a higher consciousness where I can become the channel and connect with, and I become the mystic. When I become the mystic, I am, as Jesus said, when you see me, you see the Father. What was he referring to? He was saying, I am that voice of truth. I'm no longer this physical Jesus body person, a personality. When you see me, you see the Father. I have become it. I am expressing it as a being. And that's you. That's why you chose to get in line to come here for this incarnation. Because you said, I can do that. Because when you do that, you raise the consciousness of the whole world.
Right.
Your purpose here, and the reason you're in this class, there are no accidents, is because you're ready to take it to the next level. You're saying, what's my purpose? Why am I here? And it's just that simple. We're here to help save the world, literally. Not by beating them up with the Bible or making them conform to some idea that we have, but by simply becoming the voice of truth.
I don't know if we have to save the world. I mean, would that be a judgment, Tony?
Well, the small cat, or the cat cannot drive the car. The cat cannot conceive of that even, right? But for the higher self, it's like, just give me a chance. I'll show you how it's done, right? Because the world that you're going to save is the world that you have created. You're thinking of all this other stuff out there that Lisa created. You don't have to save her world, or Jesse's world, or Tony's world. It's John. The world that you have experienced and expressed in all day today. I don't know where you were. Maybe you were hanging out with these guys. I don't know who you, but you know what? Whoever's in your world is the world that you become the expression of love. We took love, I erased it. But love is what you begin to express. As love, in perfect safety, I release all tension. I'm not afraid of anything. I don't have to worry about what's going on down the street because I'm not attracting that into my life, you see. I'm invulnerable because I'm holding a high vibration of love. And in this energy, if it comes into my experience, it's because I'm here to be the presence of love in that energy, to hold a vigil, to hold a high watch, right? That's why you came. You stood in line to be here and said, I'm going to go do this. I'm getting better at this. I'm going to remember to step over the short wall and to allow all things just as they are, to not judge them. So I'm going to move back before I gave judgment. Before I give judgment is forgiveness. I'm moving back before forgiveness. Because what am I giving? Judgment. What do I experience when I withhold judgment? Innocence. Love. In its purest expression. I see the innocence in everything, in all things. Jesus saw the innocence in his disciples and everyone in his life because he wasn't judging anyone. He was being the expression of non-judgment. He literally stayed on the other side of the short wall, if you will.
For the most part, he did.
Yeah. So this is a practice that we would do for the whole month of January.
Is there class every Thursday night now?
Yes.
Coming.
Yep. And I'm going to try to remain diligent in doing that, at least until, I don't know, May, if maybe even June this year before we're going to take another break. But it won't. It may not be that long. I don't know if we can make it that long, right? But the point is, you see how this is a higher consciousness, this is a higher energy, and all you have to do is just step over the wall within yourself and begin to practice. This is creating the environment I talked about earlier. Set the intention and then create the environment where your intention can be experienced, where your intention can be expressed and lived up to. You have to create the environment. It's just step over the wall. It's already there. You create it. In every moment, you make the decision which side of that wall you're going to be on.
Good.
What's next?
I don't know.
Okay, so you asked a very important question. How do we get to these higher levels? This is the number one key right here. It's forgiveness, right? We're going to take you through a series of steps throughout the year, next year, starting next week.
Would it be better just not to judge, then you wouldn't have to forgive?
Yes, but if we have a formula, a practice, a mantra, a meditation, if we have a prescription, we'll have better results than we will just trying to navigate out through the world because, like Lisa said, hell, it's right down the street, it's apps on my phone, it's in my news, it's on my radio, it's all around me. So we kind of need to have a roadmap, and that's what the map of consciousness is. The reason we talk about that so much is because at least it gives us a roadmap. We can see if I'm going to go to Florida, I don't have to go by way of Montana. I got a map that shows me the signpost of that I'm getting closer and closer to my destination where I want to be, right? And it does actually begin in earnest as soon as you say, okay, I want to operate out of integrity. How can I be integrity? And honesty is really an important key. Self-honesty is huge. Catching yourself telling little lies, right? Because you're doing that out of fear. I catch myself doing it. I'm going, why am I doing that? Oh, because I'm afraid. So now I can do some investigative work. I said, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid this other person isn't going to love me, or I'm afraid this other person is going to judge me, or they're not going to see me in the way that I'm trying to project myself to be this person, this special person, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
And so that's a lot of digging, but
Right.
that's the only thing we need to focus on is what's right on top of the stack.
Right.
What's the name of that game?
Pick up stick.
Pickup stick, right? We've played that game. You throw the sticks and then you're supposed to take the one off the top is the one you got to deal with without disturbing the pile.
Not moving them,
That's, people, they go on these witch hunts and they're digging down, oh, look at all the crap that I did and I've been a bad person, blah, 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 and I got to forgive this myself. No, you don't have to go. There's plenty and it's right on top.
Right.
And if you'll work with what's on top, what's disturbing your peace today,
There's
the stuff that's already down under that's just like that, and that vibration, it'll be gone. Because once you've forgiven yourself for this, is about self-forgiveness.
Right.
It's yourself that you really are.
Well, I go to men's group Wednesday nights, and we always have a check-in on relationships, and I always do the relationship with myself. And most of the time, I'm at 75-80% of liking myself. And I mean, that's just something I do. You just, because it's like, there's times when I think I don't like myself, and then those are things you have to work on, yeah.
So what's the percentage of loving yourself?
Oh, that would probably be right around, probably not quite as high as liking though, I suppose. I would say I probably love myself 60 to 70% of the time, yeah. There's sometimes I'll work too hard and then I'll say, why don't I take a break, and I'll push myself a little bit harder than I need to. I work for myself, I have a farm up in Hopkinsville and that, sometimes I will work a little harder than I need to, but I'm working on that.
Right. But do you do what you do up there because you love
Yeah.
it? I mean, you're not doing it out of guilt.
No.
Right.
No, and I'm trying to I got a farm, 130 acres, and I'm trying to get it all up and going and get some organic dairy cattle on it and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
So it's sometimes it's I'll be working in the mud and the rain, but it doesn't bother me too much, But another thing I learned is 70% of the people live in cities now, and only 30% live in nature or outside, and the cities make up 3% of the land mass. And I think, and then television, and you see all these young people, or not, maybe that's a judgment probably, but everybody's on their cell phone.
Yeah.
And, they don't go outside and play, the kids, and things, so, and nature, there was, I think, wasn't it Kant that said God could be found in nature?
Oh,
The
well,
philosophers, I think.
yeah, I believe you're right about that, but I will tell you that whether it was Kant or not,
Right.
that's absolutely the truth.
Right.
We go on hikes on a regular basis
Right.
just to be out in nature,
Yeah.
is to begin to accept things, to let it be, to allow things.
Right.
You get out in nature and you start to see that, the trees aren't really too concerned about your problems.
No, they're
Right.
not. Or the coyotes aren't, nobody, none of them are.
Right.
They-
And so your experience on that land is healing.
Yeah, it's,
Right.
it's beautiful.
Right,
yeah.
because you probably don't think about fear out there too much. You're just immersed in this energy of allowance and acceptance.
Yeah, the only fear I have, it's a smaller fear now, but it's paying for it. That's the only,
That's
Yeah, well, no, I'm not worried about it. I hardly ever worry about it, but there's probably 10% of the time I do. It's always a little nag there thinking, yeah. So you just,
So, but that self is the self of fear,
yeah.
right? We know where it's from. And so you have the power to do this. Wait a minute, you know what? Shut up. I'm not going to listen to that right now.
Yeah.
Because you have the power to ignore that voice. That voice is the AM channel, right? And you want to tune in, well, I'll say the FM channel,
Yeah.
but you want to tune into the AM channel or the IM channel, which is the higher. And say, okay, I'm not going to, because you have the power to ignore that voice of fear.
Right.
Because fear is a liar.
Right.
It has no foundation in truth and has never told the truth. So you say, you know what, I'm not going to listen to that right now. And then I ask the question, are you there? So I'm asking my higher self, right? So we've been going through this process, and basically we're saying, I know who you are, right? I know what you are. I know how you serve. Word, I am word. And so word, for you, Lisa, tonight, I'll share the definition, is the energy of the creator in action, okay? We're just using the word, capital W-O-R-D, right? So it's the energy of the Creator in action. So when you say word, I am word, so you're invoking that energy for yourself. You're seeing yourself in that higher space, in that higher energy. You're holding a higher vibration. And you can feel that shift. So what we've been doing, we had the last few classes, we missed last week, so we lost a little momentum. But we had, I think, 14, 15, 16 people, whatever, these last few weeks. And I'm expecting, we'll rebuild that momentum here in the next month, a week or two.
They knew there was class.
They may not. Yeah, they may not. So that'll start to rebuild, and when we'll go through that practice together, and we pair up, as a one and a two, and we kind of go through some rituals. I'll be sharing more of those, if you want to call them affirmations or intention statements, next year as we go forward, and you'll see people crying, and people are just like, and they're walking, and they're like, people come to me after, they're like, oh man, this is, that my energy's really elevated. Because I've had this experience, and you can feel this energy. And so that's really what we're looking to do. Not to think about it, but to begin to experience what does it feel like. It's about turning to the feeling self and beginning to recognize the energy of love versus the energy of hatred, which you already know that energy. You have experienced the energy of hatred, rage, anger, frustration, jealousy. All we know what those energies feel like, and they'll be overwhelming, and we don't even question it. I'm just overwhelmed with anger, and my whole body's firing, and I can feel it. Well, you can feel that energy the same way when you're tuned into the energy of love. It's just as powerful, in fact, more powerful. But the difference is that it begins to heal the body. And this energy of love is just amazing. And as you begin to recognize it, you begin to experience it more and more and more in your daily life. That's another one of the steps that we'll be taking, the practices that we'll be learning to find our way into the channel consciousness and ultimately the mystic consciousness.
I have to tell you just an example today of love, and it was kind of mystical. I was at AutoZone just getting car parts, and it was full of all black people, which was okay. And there was a guy there, and he said, hey brother, how you doing? I said, good. And then I got my parts, and he went outside, and then I was walking out to my car, and he goes, hey brother, you got 75 cents? And I knew I had 35 cents. And I says, I got 35 cents, and this bolt of lightning hit, kaboom, and two great big streaks went across the sky at about 4 o'clock, and he was like this far, and he looks at me. We couldn't even talk to each other because it was so loud, the noise, and we just both started laughing, and then I left. Yeah, but it was pretty incredible, and I didn't judge it, because I see panhandlers all the time, everywhere, and I try to give him $1 here and there, and then he asked for 75 cents. I thought, hardly anybody asked for 75 cents, And
sometimes it's like $4.29.
Yeah.
It's always like a dollar amount and then some change amount.
Yeah.
It's so weird. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And I knew I had like 35, 50 cents, and then this bolt of lightning hit, boom, and then he just looked at me. It was just God's way of saying,
Yeah.
hey, you're all right.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
all right.
That's
We were
cool.
just doing our stuff, yeah.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was kind of nice. I liked it.
So that's what our intention is for this week, for this year, is that we transform our awareness so that we can see love where it's at. And where is love? Everywhere. Right? And what is a miracle? Let's go back to A Course in Miracles. What's a miracle? The definition of a miracle is a sudden shift of perception out of fear into love. Right?
It's a sudden shift of what?
Perception.
Perception.
Yeah. So out of the state of mind of fear into an immediate release of that, dissolving all tension, stepping right into the energy of love. We cannot do that with the small thinking self because it only operates out of fear and guilt. We can only tell it to sit down and shut up. I'm going to let my higher self be expressed now as who I am. Right? And that begins very simply by just asking that question, are you there? And you're going to begin to get a response, an echo. And it'll come in whatever way is going to work best for you because your higher self knows how to communicate with you. It's been with you in every thought you've ever had. It knows every thought you've ever had. There's no such thing as private thoughts. And it's never judged you. Spirit does not, there's no judgment in spirit, you see. None whatsoever. And so that is the alchemy, that is the transformation. To move ultimately into a self that is the expression of love. It's a self that's the expression of health. It's a self that's the expression of abundance. It's a self that's the expression of joy. It's a self that is the embodiment of love. And that is our task here. That's really our goal. That's what we're going to do. We're going to map it out. We're going to begin to experience those experiences together. We're going to spend time together in this environment, which I would like to tell you is an environment of unconditional love. I don't care what you bring into this. I don't care what you bring into this meeting, right?
I
Because
like this room better than the one downstairs,
yeah, we got more room, and it's not so.
Nicer, yeah.
Yep. So okay, I try to honor your time. Any questions? We got about 5 or 6 more minutes, and we'll wrap it up.
I said I was